Stop.
Only 3 months away, lots of tickets had been sold. Media pressure and pressure from campaigners against anti-Semitism. That's the reason given for the venue pulling out. Pressure on the venue has resulted in them saying, we're not going to host the event. That's a shame, that. I won't spend too much time repeating what I said last night about the cutting-edge nature of what David is doing, him being out on his own. Thousands and thousands more people are coming to davidicke.com to get a different take on geopolitical events and economic trends. The tour itself has been a massive success so far, and I'm, for one, not surprised that this has happened. I know he's not surprised that it's happened. Now, today, the campaign against anti-Semitism, in the guise of a man called Stephen Silverman, released this statement, and I'm going to read it to you word for word. Might take me a couple of minutes, but it's worth bearing with me. This is from Stephen Silverman of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. I'm not going to do anything else now other than read this verbatim. Prior to Icke's Manchester performance, Campaign Against Anti-Semitism contacted the O2 Apollo as well as O2's PR department and its chief executive Mark Evans. There was no response until the day of the show, when O2's head of sponsorship replied to us, stating that the general manager for O2 Apollo has spoken to the show promoter to seek assurances about this show, which has been given, and the venue's police contact has been informed. Given the information provided by Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and Icke's track record to date, this is a wholly inadequate response. It is implausible that a 12-hour unscripted performance could have been thoroughly vetted independently of its promoter. O2's unscrupulous acquiescence to a venue they sponsor hosting a vehement anti-Semite is representable. David Icke preaches that a Jewish conspiracy controls the world, started both world wars, and that Hitler acted on valid information. Not only did the O2 Apollo allow Icke to address their packed venue for 12 hours, they profited from it. Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has written to Manchester City Council asking that they fine the venue an amount in excess of the profits from the evening and impose licence conditions so that this does not happen again. We would like to hear from anybody who witnessed the performance. If you attended or know someone who did, please email investigations@antisemitism.uk. That's plural. Investigations@antisemitism.uk. You may wish to contact O2's Chief Executive Mark Evans to let him know how you feel about the decision by the O2 Apollo, which O2 sponsors, to host a modern-day anti-Semitic hate preacher to address a sellout audience for 12 hours. You may also want to contact Manchester City Council's licensing unit, and the email address is given, setting out how you feel about the venue hosting speakers of this nature. What's going on? Well, before I go any further, I did tweet Stephen Silverman today, and I invited him to come on the programme, and I since that, because I didn't get any response from him, I'm sure he saw the tweet, I did email him, basically inviting him on the programme to talk about anti-Semitism in general, why it is he feels that the presentation given by David Icke is in any way anti-Semitic, and to talk about Theresa May's attempts to define it legally, and to talk about racism in general. I did state clearly to Silverman that, like everybody else who's come on the programme, he would be respected, treated fairly, and given time to formulate his ideas and to express himself. I've yet to hear from him or anybody from that organisation. But to be fair to them, I only tweeted him a couple of hours ago, and the email was only sent about 35 minutes ago. Now, Stephen Silverman, according to the website of antisemitism.uk, is a former IT and business consultant who specialised in effecting cultural change and improved business performance within multinational corporations. Back in 2014, he became increasingly concerned by something he never expected to see in Britain, a surge in openly expressed hatred towards the Jewish community on the streets on social media and even in certain branches of political discourse. Alarmed by this, and alarmed by anti-Semitism becoming normalised in public life, he joined a campaign against anti-Semitism back in 2015. It's interesting to note that they're not here to speak tonight, but the terrific Stephen Englander, who is an accountant and is heavily involved with Beyond Vision television. Stephen is Jewish, very prominent member of the Jewish community in Manchester, in North Manchester. And completely aside from this, over a week ago, I asked Stephen and I asked Andrew, who's my accountant, the accountant for the Richie Allen Show, also a Jewish man and very active in the Jewish community. I asked them even, was there a surge in openly expressed hatred towards Jews? Was anti-Semitism on the rise? And both of them said to a man, absolutely not. They'd never experienced it. In fact, I was going to invite Stephen to come on the programme, but that's only two people. That doesn't mean that Stephen Silverman is wrong. Where is it all coming from, though? Before I go into that briefly, I would like you, if you went to the event on Saturday, to email Mr. Silverman at the email address that he's given, investigations@antisemitism.uk, and give a completely uncorrupted and a completely influenced even appraisal of what you saw on the day. Good, bad or indifferent, do email investigations@antisemitism.uk and tell Stephen Silverman, that's Stephen, what you thought happened on the day, and address his claims that anti-Semitism was made up any part of the presentation. I, for one, can't understand why this guy Silverman wouldn't attend the event himself. That's question number one I would ask him, if and when he chooses to take up my offer and come on the programme. I say, Stephen, why didn't you go to it? And have you ever read one of David Icke's books? Have you ever spent any time in his company? Have you ever attended an event like the one we saw on Saturday, where anti-Semitism couldn't have been any further away from what was discussed on the day? So what's going on then? Well, I'll tell you what I think is going on. Why is this happening to David Icke right now? To try and demonstrate it, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to fall back on a couple of audio clips. Now, back in the spring of last year, David Icke was invited onto the BBC Late Night Politics programme with Andrew Neil and Michael Portillo and other guests. They brought David on and undoubtedly thought they'd poke a bit of fun at him. Didn't go very well for them, for the producers. This was last spring. Andrew Neil, first of all, asks David Icke to name for him a conspiracy.
Ironically, we've had George Osborne this week trying to ridicule conspiracies involving the EU by likening them to believing in the Loch Ness Monster. And in the same week, we've had the Daily Mail exposing the Prime Minister for conspiring, in effect, with big business to frighten the public into staying in the EU, while publicly to Parliament as well, saying that he would come out if the renegotiations didn't work. That's a conspiracy.
Is that a conspiracy, or is it just politicians doing the time-honoured thing of being less than honest with us?
Well, if you're telling the public that you will have the option of coming out if you do not renegotiate with the EU the way you want, and you don't do that, and at the same time you're telling the public and Parliament that, you are working with big business behind the scenes already to frighten the public into staying in, even though your renegotiation's not finished. That is a conspiracy to mislead the public.
Now, as an avid consumer of mainstream media and as an expert in media production, and I am, it's the only thing I'll declare myself to be an expert in, I know full well that David Icke was the only commentator across the BBC's 20-plus radio stations, that's nationally, and 50 regional stations and television stations, to point out that the Prime Minister of the country should have been forced to resign immediately for telling people, listen, don't worry, I'm going to get the best deal, and if we don't, I'm going to support coming out. Well, at the same time, he was lying through his teeth and was doing deals with big business to scare people into acquiescing to the whole we must stay in the European Union nonsense. Okay? This is very important, right? So Neil then tried a bit of sarcasm, smugly asking David, what other conspiracies should we be worried about? Now remember, having been given a conspiracy by Neil, Neil said it's not just a time-honoured tradition of politicians being less than honest with us, when he should have said, well, we'll put it to Cameron, and, you know, if there's no explanation for this, well, we'll be asking Cameron to consider his position. So he smugly asks David, what other conspiracies should we be worried about? Listen.
What other conspiracies should we worry about?
Well, what we're looking at all the time are conspiracy after conspiracy coming to light, while the idea of conspiracy and the very word conspiracy is demonized. For instance, we have a situation with this Chilcot inquiry where we're going to see, indeed the information has already come out, that the Prime Minister of the time, Tony Blair and George Bush and the administrations, lied to us to justify an invasion of Iraq. And that is a conspiracy that has cost the lives of staggering numbers of people and created an ongoing catastrophe that's still going on. And let's not forget this. The very same people, not just the same agencies, the same people that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew they weren't, those very same people gave us the official story of 9/11. And what the mainstream media is doing...
Was 9/11 a conspiracy?
Of course it was.
Who was behind it?
Well, what was behind it was...
No, who was behind it?
Well, again, in the time we've got here, it's very difficult. But there is a network that works through government agencies, through organisations like the CIA, etc., to push an agenda on the world which is unfolding by the day. My books in the 1990s laid out what this agenda was, and those books are now being read on the television news in changes in society and laws coming in.
Okay.
And the thing is, this is the point, the mainstream media has accepted that those same characters lied about Iraq, but will not question in any way the same people's version of 9/11. They're journalists, it's their job.
Now, Neil then threw in the royal family lizard question, which was answered rationally by David. David said there's a massive backstory, there's historical evidence about these entities, and David said the throwaway line about lizards is silly. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, I'll get to it in a second. Michael Portillo, former Conservative MP, was on the same show, sitting opposite David, and Portillo felt like throwing in his tuppence worth.
Yes, I know people put a lot of work into conspiracy theories, but I still think they're actually intellectually lazy. I think, you know, people just don't want to get their head around the way things really work. That having been said, I mean, let me say firstly that, you know, a lot of people are gullible about conspiracies. I mean, I think the police were extremely gullible about the Downing Street paedophile ring, as it turns out. And on the other hand, I'll just end my comment with this point. There clearly was a conspiracy over Hillsborough. And over 28 years or whatever it was, people denied there was a conspiracy, but there was.
My last book, before the present one, is 1,000 pages. Have you read any of my books?
No, I haven't.
How do you know that it's intellectually lazy?
I wasn't talking about you, actually,
No,
David.
no, you were talking about me, because that's what I do.
Yeah, checkmate. They never have him back on the programme. What's the context you're thinking? Well, not in that interview and in a previous interview David gave to BBC Wolverhampton Radio, anti-Semitism never came up. So what's the context? I can hear the gears of your brain grinding away there. This is the context. Why are they going after him now? Because I've said time and time again, he's out on his own now. His contemporaries have become lazy, hopeless, mainstream light, compromised, or they're following the money. 2 years previously, Andrew Neil, the guy speaking with David there, interviewed Alex Jones. This is how it went.
You let him speak now.
Well, sir, I saw one of your ministers say this, though.
No,
Alex,
I'm here.
It's tyranny.
No, shut up.
I'm
here to testify that your head was not cut off. The problem is that conspiracy theories like this are believed in...
Hey, listen, I'm here to warn people. You keep telling me to shut up. This isn't a game. Okay, our government in the U.S. is building FEMA camps. We have an NDAA where they disappear people now. You have this arrest for public safety, life in prison.
You are the worst person I've ever interviewed.
No, it's basically off with their heads, disappear
David,
them,
thank you for being with us.
Infowars.com.
It's gone 11:30. You're watching the Sunday Politics. We have an idiot on the program today. Coming up in just 20 minutes.
You will not stop the Republic. Humanity is awakening. Infowars.com. No, you guys are...
Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that Andrew Neil covered himself in glory there, or the BBC production team. But this is the context. You see, when Alex Jones and others are not promoting Trump these days and blaming the world's problems on radical Islam, they're saying things like Hillary has a smell of sulphur coming from her, and that homosexuals the world over are trying to teach children degrading sex acts like fisting. The forces behind the agenda we talk about couldn't give less of a damn about people like Alex Jones. He's entertainment. He's certainly not cutting edge and is a threat to nobody, like so many of these other contemporaries I mentioned that have fallen by the wayside. You see, David Icke terrifies these people because he's calm, he's rational, he's a marvellous speaker, he's compassionate. And nobody has ever, as I said yesterday, juxtaposed the esoteric nature of this, the what's the word I'm looking for, the metaphysical relationship to what's gone on thousands of years ago with the events of today, and they're terrified of it. Now, ironically, the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism have put out a video clip that they say, in fact, they say supports everything that they claim about David Icke being anti-Semitism when he talks about Zionism. Now, in the interest of time, because I've played the clip several times, I'm not going to play it here, but I'm going to say exactly what David says in the clip, word for word. In the clip now that the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism say, is there evidence that David is in some way anti-Semitic? David says that Zionism, the Jewish people are as much victims of it as anybody else, and that Jewish people don't benefit from it. David claims in the clip put out by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism that Zionists claim to have the interests of Israelis at the heart of their agenda. In fact, they don't. He says clearly it's a secret society, a political ideology, and you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. And then he goes on to say that Judaism as a religion couldn't be any further from the Zionist ideology and philosophy. Staggering, really. The amount of time spent on Saturday talking about the folly of racism and where it comes from. All of this stuff. So where is it coming from? Chatting briefly with David over the last couple of days, David said to me, look, there's a little bit of a timeline which is interesting. In the months in advance of the event at the Apollo Theatre in Manchester, there wasn't a dicky bird, not a whisper from anybody about anything, with any problem at all about David speaking. But on Monday last, not just 2 days ago, but the previous Monday before the event, The Guardian asked for an interview in Manchester. David turned them down. On Tuesday, Channel 4 News asked him for an interview to report on the event, and David said okay. But less than a day after Channel 4 News came in, Stephen Silverman contacted the venue saying, we have been told David Icke is speaking there. At that point, David said to Channel 4 News, I'd rather not do it. David is very honest, and he said, well, look, I can't prove cause and effect here, but it's an incredible coincidence, that sequence of events. It's been a long time, way before I began speaking with David, that anybody threw the accusation of anti-Semitism against him, because it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And well-known Jewish celebrities in this country, including Louis Theroux and others, have said no. When David says Zionist, he means Zionist. And when David means or says reptilian entity, he means reptilian entity. So what's going on? I put it to you again. What's going on is that while all of these heavyweights in the so-called alternative media are disappearing up their own arse, or disappearing entirely, going mainstream light, or backing major campaigns and politicians, this man stands now on his own. And there's never been a better speaker, a better communicator, a more rational, lucid thinker putting this information together. And it's a critical time for these people, as more and more people, misguided of course, but still, it's a good thing, throwing their lot in behind Trump because they're pissed off. More and more people are looking towards David Icke specifically. Can't have that. So we'll start trouble like this. I doubt very much Manchester City Council or anybody else, and I hope I'm not proved wrong, will take seriously the complaint by the campaign against anti-Semitism. That being said, I reiterate again tonight that they are welcome to come on this programme and have a friendly, open, robust, if they want, discussion about what constitutes anti-Semitism and why it is they feel that they should be bothering the O2, asking for them to be fined based on nothing. So I've invited Stephen Silverman on. If there's any response from him, you'll be the first to hear it. 27 minutes past the hour. This is your Richie Allen Show, brought to you in association with davidicke.com. Remember that email address again, investigations, plural, investigations@antisemitism.uk. Email Mr. Silverman. He's asking for people to give their